video, and the first 3 have been amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, you definitely want to watch them all.
At the bottom, there's a link.
Yes, go watch the other ones. So it's Annual Girls Weekend. And our first video was talking about why we all come, even though it's, as we all know, there's kids and spouses and careers and budgets that make it hard, and why it's worth it to us. Our second video was about the logistics, like tips and advice we would give, having done this for 14 years in a row, of what we would do to be able to, it was for you, and to be able to, like, what makes it easier for us to come? How do we make that happen? And then our third video was on what we do when we're all together, like what makes it magical, how is it meaningful, like how do we actually, why do it, what is it all about? And so in this final video, I just kind of want us to do some more logistics about when we're together. So what makes our time together meaningful, what makes it easier, what makes it helpful. We've talked a little bit about, like, we plan the weekend out, like before we leave this time, we will all look at our calendars and kind of land on the weekend that we'll kind of all plan around. So we do that far out. What else have we already mentioned? And then, like, we also want to add some other things. But what else have we mentioned?
One thing I wanted to talk about was just budget.
Yes.
Is we're all very honest about where we are financially and what we can afford. So we start off by seeing if anybody has a place that we can go to for free, and so that kind of determines.
90% of the time, it's amazing. You have like somebody who has parents who has a timeshare. We have somebody who has a second home that we know. Like, I mean,
Or we kick a husband out. That's happened.
We've done that before too, yeah. And kids. I mean, yeah. No, that's true. And we have some. We've done our highest goal is cheap, like as much as possible, right? Like,
And so when we've gone and stayed a place,
Affordable.
rather than it's important for us to all be together
Yes.
and have a place to share information. So an open space like this where we have a couch, a kitchen that's open instead of like individual hotel rooms makes it better. So like for this weekend, Airbnb, and so we just had an honest conversation about here's a couple of options, what feels good to everybody, and having that type communication makes it more comfortable for us to show up.
It is a hairy part of the communication process, you know.
it's vulnerable.
It's vulnerable. You know, some of us pay more in flights because we live further away, and yet the place still needs to be paid, the food still needs to be paid for. So if you find that it's an uncomfortable conversation, just know that it's going to be. But the importance of being honest. I know one year I had flown out from San Antonio, and I was under the impression that I wasn't helping with the room because 2 people were already in Southern California. And I remember I was like, I remember being shocked, and I remember going like, what am I going to tell my husband? And like, it was really uncomfortable. And someone else stepped up and paid, which I'm not saying we need to, do that. I'm just saying that was huge, because for me to have gone back, and tell my husband it might have been a little bit tough. And so that kind of communication beforehand, it's really important to get done.
But I love that in that moment, because of the vulnerability we have established and just, learning what has worked and what hasn't. I love that you were able to state that, because it hadn't even clicked in my mind and it made sense to me.
And
you spoke your truth,
and
so
it created a conversation that from there on out, we were just like, okay, so how are we doing
That's
this?
important.
So
We need to be aware of that.
So now our rule of, like, if we kind of have a rule that we follow, it is we're all kind of spread out, and we kind of had resources near us at different times. So we've kind of moved around to different, like this one, we're close to my house. Like, we're only an hour and a half away from my place. And so I didn't have to fly anywhere. So when it's kind of our general place that if I didn't have to do an airline ticket, then I'm picking up food. I'm picking up the groceries for everybody. And so nobody else needs to pay for that. Like, that's my contribution this year. Last year we were down in Southern California, and 2 of them lived down there. And so they did the groceries, and they didn't have to fly. I think you guys picked up something else, knowing that they didn't have to do airfare. They threw in something else. And so and if it's not near any of us, then that's the years that we're just like, okay, we have a timeshare in Arizona that we can get for free, so we're just going to split the groceries, and we know that ahead of time. So our goal is to always kind of keep it affordable and to kind of make sure that we're all pitching in a different, and it still is not always perfectly even, but I think our goal is, like, the biggest thing is that we're all here. And
not to let it be a stressor for anybody.
And I would say, don't try to make it to be perfectly even. Just know that, when I finally, again, I was also in a very tight financial resource place at the time, and I am in a little bit better of a place. But now I was sharing all this information with this lady on the plane, and I was telling her, like, I chose to move to San Antonio. Like, I chose to make that move, and one of the results of that choice is that I'm going to always have to pay for a ticket. And I'm actually okay with that because what I get in the weekend is worth so much. So I would say that probably you as well. We probably end up spending a little bit more just because we have to come from further. But if we're counting every penny, it's going to take away from the experience. And at that time, I was counting every penny because that's where my husband and I were. But now we're in such a better place, I don't have to. And so it's just like, hey, you know.
And it helped you to be able to say, I just need to budget ahead of time. Expectations was a big part of it. So,
Yes.
so then, therefore, we're not planning the next year. We're not being like, okay, let's go do a spa weekend. In fact, the year that we were doing that, we were like, okay, so what if we have a free house? We're staying at my house. My husband's out of town. The food is covered. I'm covering the food. Like, can we go to the Korean spa? You know, and like that's going to be a splurge, but it's kind of a conversation. It's not an assumption, and none of us are coming. Those of us, some people have more money. This isn't one of those things where it's like, well, this isn't a very fun girls' weekend if we're not going and doing all these amazing things. Like our goal is to be together, and so we'd much rather not go to the spa and be together.
Yes.
But it's a fun splurge if we're in a place where that's like doable or something.
And I think being willing to have the awkward conversation and know that these things are hard to work out sometimes, and it's kind of a fluid process where if something at some point isn't working with the way we're doing things, we're all willing to reevaluate.
And it's all about give and take because, again, like I said, I would not have gone to the Korean spa if it had been up to me. I'm so glad that I did, right? You know, it's all about...
changed your life!
Hashtag life changing. But no, there are many areas where I think that we give and take. I think that sometimes we have an introvert who would maybe prefer not to do some things but ends up doing them, or we have, you know, there's many things I think that we do that are slightly outside of our comfort zone, or I hate to use the word, maybe not exactly fair or even, but in the end it creates a conversation that brings us closer.
We learn about each other. That's what I
And we learn to have the conversation.
Yes.
Because if we can start to realize, I think, in these, you know, closeness and then safeness of this, having those conversations, then we can also model that outside, having, you know, the same, like, you know, strength to be able to talk about finances or other issues with other people in our lives.
I think that's one of my favorite things about us is that I'm always saying we gotta have tough conversations with our friends. Like in our romantic relationships, we kind of know that we're gonna have to sit and talk finances, and we don't like say, well, this marriage isn't gonna work because that was an awkward conversation, you know. And yet we do that. But with friendships, it's just amazing to me how many friends try to avoid, and then would go home and be like, it's just too expensive, it's not worth it to me, and then just back out of it or something without giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. It's not just an awkward conversation that has to be had like a chore. It actually helps us learn about each other, which bonds us, which then we actually feel closer to each other. And now we feel safer. And now 2 years later, when somebody else is in a financial situation, they feel safer bringing it up. And so it like really created more intimacy, like all of the thing. And we've had some years, honestly, where it's not like I don't think we've come home every single time and been like, everything was amazing and fun. Like there's been some hurt feelings. There's been kind of like some frustration. There's been like, we've had some years where there's some tough stuff, and it's like, but it's it builds the safety that over the long run.
It's the commitment to going through it.
Yeah. That if you just look at that one moment, you would be like, do I want to do that again? Well, I don't want to do that exactly again.
No, we're not going back
Next year
there.
was more amazing because of that.
And I think that if your viewers can kind of learn from these norms that we're setting up that we had to work through, I think one thing that was lucky for us is that we did start 14 years all together, right? Yeah. So we started in the same area, so we didn't have to worry about flights in. We didn't have to worry about all these logistics. So we had already made it clear this is something that we wanted to be doing. Yeah. So by the time we were all dispersed and coming in, the conversation was still tough and awkward, but it was also, we knew we wanted to go forward with it. Yeah. So if you're starting with a group that's already in these other areas, I feel like we can warn you, hey, this is something that you should talk about. It's going to be awkward, and go for it, because if you don't have that safety build up like we had, the conversation might not happen. You might not end up going through it.
I could see two ways where you would be creating a group. Is like, one is you all live in the same area now and are friends and want to go do a getaway from everybody. True. In which case you have a friendship that's happening, and it's like having slumber parties. I mean, we did that as kids, and yet as adults, it's like, rather than just always doing life with the kids and with the spouses and just for lunches and just for dinners, there's something so magical about going away for several days. Like, I think that would be a great way to do it. And I think the other way to do it would be friends that used to all know each other from somewhere. Like, we were all used to be connected, and we've all moved away and aren't connected anymore. Like, what would it look like if we all got together one year? I had a girl write me. She saw that I was doing a girls' weekend, and she said that one year in lieu of her destination wedding, 2 of her friends, it was going to be really, really pricey for them to come. And she ended up saying to all of them, why don't we just, in lieu of you being at this wedding, why don't we just all get together for a girls' weekend 3 weeks after my wedding? And she said, and they've been now doing 26 years together, where they've been, like, that just started as like them doing the girls' weekend, and now they do that. Like, there's so many ways to do it, but I think it's just the getting the started of doing it, and you love it, and then you want to do it again. But.
Yeah, and I think there's something about the time. We initially started, we were talking about Fridays through Sunday, and with the traveling and the time, because we have an intention to not like rush ourselves through the information and our sharing time, and because we do specific journaling, it felt like we just landed, and then we like ate and went to sleep, and then we woke up. We had to hustle through, but
we had this one full day of Saturday.
So we had the conversation. Can we possibly stretch it to Thursday? And it's amazing how much of a difference it makes. I mean, especially I can speak for me, where I'm like, okay, like this time Val and I could have worked in the morning on Thursday, but we needed to get a flight, and it was like, you know what? This is just part of my self-care. This is part of what I'm going to do to cut that part so that I can enjoy this part fully. Yeah. And
it
so
doesn't take that much more on the back end to give up a day, but it makes such a difference on this end to have
huge.
Even last night we were just like, oh my goodness, the time's going so fast, it's almost gone, And we're like,
give me a week.
Exactly. But no, that's a good point. Giving ourselves the extra time makes a really,
But it
big
does.
difference.
Because I mean, how many times have you been with a girlfriend at lunch and you're like, oh, I wish we could talk more, but I have to pick up the kids, or you feel like your time is incredibly valuable, and yet we piecemeal it, and this time we really don't feel like we have to do as much.
Well, then you come in and you do the catch up, right? Like, so how did that work out with so and so? And like, where's that? And you're so what are they? And we're doing all the catch up, and it just takes a little bit of time to just kind of keep sinking down. Where finally, and then we play, and we laugh, and we have fun, and then we just go do something that's not talking, and then we do a little self-reflection. But by the time tonight comes, we're like talking about like stuff that's not just catch up, but like life sharing. Like, this is what's going on in my heart, and that's a different.
All the layers are gone, and when you're having lunch with your girlfriend, I hope you can get to that, but sometimes
it takes a little bit of time.
Do you want to talk about the numbers and how you think Forbes?
Oh yeah, you were telling the person
I'm a
lady on the
strong
plane
believer.
that 5. Jayleen would say 5 is the best number.
I really would.
And I would say 4.
I do agree that 4 is actually probably better than 5.
Who wasn't voted out?
I have these issues.
oh my gosh! Listen,
I'll pack my bags right now.
Just our experience. Just our experience.
5 is the perfect number. I'm with you.
No, and I do think that even with 5, there is always like a third going on. So if you break off into private conversations, there's always 2 and then 3, or so with 5 there is this awkward moment because we don't tend to go off by ourselves, because we do tend to think this is all the time that I have with them, and even if I need that alone time, which some of us never do, we don't tend to do it this weekend because we only have this finite amount of time. And so I do agree that with sensitive people, 5 can be an awkward number. But the reason why I don't think it should be more than 5 is that most vehicles I know this sounds crazy, but most vehicles carry 5 no matter what. So if you're thinking of doing 8 and you have the Toyota Sequoia to pull it off, but then somebody loses that vehicle, all of a sudden now you're in 2 separate vehicles. So now conversations are happening, and you have to decide, are we going to catch each other up on those conversations, or are we just going to keep forward? And even though we do often break off into our conversations of 2 different groups, it's only those 2 different groups, number one, and then often we don't know what happens in those conversations, or sometimes someone has to repeat themselves and just say, oh yeah, I was talking to them about this earlier, and it really does make sense to just keep logistics wise.
We always have 2 bedrooms at a place, and that puts, 5 is somebody's always on the couch or the hide of bed or something like that, So, but anyway, I think 3 to 5. Makes a lot
and
of
also
sense.
any more than that, you're gonna find that there isn't enough time to go deep with everyone, and someone will kind of stay out on the periphery, and then the level of vulnerability is different, and then it feels like someone's maybe being more of a voyeur, and then what are they going to do with that information? Or somebody might actually really, really be wanting to share, but others are dominating the time, and so.
No, that's a good point.
Organically, do you want to talk about like people coming in or leaving? No, seriously, I'm just.
Yeah, no, I think.
I mean, no, but I mean, I think people. I mean, if they start with 6 or 7,
no. In the early stages, it was a different dynamic. It wasn't the 5 of us, and I think that would be a whole nother video to talk about how to handle that. But I do think it's interesting that there was somebody in our group that over time this wasn't worth that. What happens is if you miss one. And then if you miss 2, suddenly you're just way behind and you've like missed a bonding. And as you know, we talk about cliques or feeling left out, but it's often if we're not the ones being consistent in there, we're missing that sharing bonding and stuff like that. And so we have had, and I think it's legit if you're starting something and if it's more of like a girl, like it's not as deep at first. I think it's legit to have more than 5 or 6. But then the goal is who's committing to next year, and like you're hoping for 4 or 5 of them to like get committed and create a group.
Because we would never want somebody to be here without
wanting to
Exactly.
be here. So it was a question to ask. It was honest that, you know,
And
do you
we
feel like
wanted
this
to
is
honor,
valuable
yeah,
to you,
yeah.
or it's okay. Yeah.
And our whole group didn't fall apart because one person decided to opt out. But we kept going, you know, and that's it's okay. Not everybody's going to want to do this and commit to that, and I think that's okay. But yeah, starting with 5 allows somebody to drop out and still have a group.
I think another thing that has, you know, I mean, a whole year in between.
Oh, good, yeah. Is a long time.
It's a long time, and there's a lot that goes on, and so even I think we could do better at it, but I feel like we have maintained some connection.
Mm-hmm. We've done
through the
better
year.
than
We've
we
done
used
better
to at
than
the
we used
beginning.
to.
Yeah.
Setting up phone calls, which is surprisingly difficult
Yeah, it
to
is.
find time, but is. Really
Chris is so
connects
good
us.
at initiating it and getting a doodle poll or whatever, but no, it's not. We get on a conference call. Like I think that's actually kind of cool. That we get on a conference call and it feels fast because we have, even if we do an hour and a half, I mean, it's still like, okay, you each get 15 minutes to tell us what's been going on for 3 or 4 months, but it does help us feel more connected. So we're not showing up and just being like, you know, completely clueless.
And we
And
have
it-
a group Facebook page.
Yeah. And we do have a group text.
And
group
it
texts
literally
and
used to
those
be
little things.
a conference call, but now we use Zoom, and it's actually way more connecting to see each
Yeah.
other's faces,
Yeah,
and we have so many more resources now. Like before, when we didn't have the doodle poll, the actual like doodle as a resource. It was difficult. At least now doodle isn't quite.
Yeah.
It's difficult, but finding that time, it is, especially with a 2-hour time difference.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you know what's
there's that.
you know what's great for you guys is often like me putting my girls down to bed, or just with my husband
Yeah.
gone. It's a little more difficult.
Yeah. But I think that's a great one that somebody at some point was just like, I miss us all the rest of the year. Like we have is magical and amazing, but like we build close friends,
Yeah.
but we aren't the friends that get to go hang out and support each other in the day-to-day life. Like we have to all build that back at home. But we do have so much history and intimacy that it'd be tragic to not have access to that during the year.
Yeah.
So I think somebody voiced that at some point and we were like, what can we do about that, you know? And we are getting better too, I think, at like bringing the spouses in on certain things, and like when I'm on book tour speaking near you, I want to see you, or like we're building relation, and that's what I would say too. We give each other permission to have relationships outside of this group, which I think is really important. Like if it felt like all 5 of us had to be together, or else we were like leaving somebody out. I mean, there's times where 2 of us call if somebody needs something, and they call me, and we have a deep conversation. And I call, like we have different friendships with each other, and not every single person here is best friends with every single person like during the year. But there's something magical when we come together. Like I think that's an interesting thing.
Literally the day after my mom died, I had 2 people drive out and meet me for coffee. I mean, out of their way in traffic, and and then for the memorial again, what do? They come and meet me, and then I have a surprise visit, and again, you're way far away, so that's you totally text me, whatever. But my point is that
and a group gift got coordinated for you.
Yes,
and
which
all
was
of that
amazing.
was because you texted us beforehand and said, "I think my mom's gonna die. I just want to let you know." I mean, I think it's on us to we do a good job of like saying, I need to text you my big things going on, because that helps us feel closer, even if we don't have time to process it.
And I didn't make the ask. I didn't, because I have family and friends. I didn't need you guys to come, but I so appreciated it, and just to have that. But my point is that not everyone needed to be there. I've missed out on 2 weddings, and yet you guys were able to have wonderful memories. And it's a bummer to have missed out. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, we don't all have to be there to be there. And then somebody always will send a text. we miss you, you know, and but it's not a like, oh, I'm not there. It's a like, oh, you know, and I'm still included, or you know, and I think we are good about that if we do kind of all get together without someone else. And but I do think you're right. There's an understanding that
we have permission to build the friendships we need at different times and to be closer to certain people.
And I think there's an understanding of what each of you, I hope, you know, what you mean to me in my life. Everyone has a different, like, gives me something in terms of your friendship. It's like when I have a stressor that's very specific to, I need someone to just hold my hand and say it's going to be okay. That might be Jay. Or, you know, if I need some wisdom that I can't kind of access myself from my wherever, that might be you.
or we need someone to just say it like it is, nice and pithy.
Or make us laugh.
Make us laugh, exactly.
Or be like, she'll be the person that's like, but I'm gonna go kill them for you.
I've got your justice.
It's amazing how good that feels. I don't want to say that, but
So I think that's cool to know that we have that ability to like get the collective or to talk to each individual and say, can you help me here?
Aww, look at us. We want you to have this. Yeah, we do. And we want you to develop this, and we know we can't just like wave a magic wand and have it happen for you, but we want you to feel loved and seen and supported. And thank you to all of you girls for using part of our weekend away as a work weekend. Love you.
Love you more.